everything about the place, about the people, the work. The expression on Seamus's face was a disturbing mix of worry and sympathy. He sipped, then offered, "He'd worked there for 3 years. Liked the place well enough at first. Said the horses were fine, but recently he said there was something going on that he didn't hold with. That's why he left." "Something going on?" Pris leaned forward. "Did he say anything more? Give any hint as to what the something was?" Seamus grimaced. "All he said was that devil Harkness, he who's head stableman at Cromarty's, was in it up to his ears, and that it, whatever it was, involved some register." She frowned. "Register?" "Paddy never said what register nor how it mattered." Seamus contemplated his beer, then looked at Pris. "I've heard tell your brother's a great one with the horses, but I ain't never heard him spoken of as one who'd tip a man the wink, nor be likely to nobble a horse, nor be involved in any other shady dealing. Lord knows Paddy weren't no saint, but if there was something going on at Cromarty stables he couldn't stomach, then seems likely your brother might have difficulties with it too." Pris stared at him. "And now Paddy's gone?" "Aye, I'm thinking it might be wise to let your brother know." Seamus hesitated, then more gently asked, "He's your twin, ain't he?" Pris nodded. "Yes." She had to work to strengthen her voice. "And thank you. I'll tell him about Paddy." She started to rise, then paused and fished in her pocket. Standing, she slipped a silver sixpence onto the table. "Have another pint. For Paddy." Pris turned and strode out of the tavern. 2 hours later, she swept into the back parlour of Dalloway Hall. Her paternal aunt Eugenia, a widow who had come to live with the family on Pris's mother's death 7 years before, sat on the chaise calmly knitting. Curled on the window seat, Adelaide, Eugenia's orphaned goddaughter, now her ward, had been idly perusing a novel. A pretty girl with glossy brown hair, 2 years younger than Pris's 24, Adelaide looked up and set aside her book. "Did you learn anything?" Pris headed for the ladies' desk by the windows. "I have to write to Russ immediately." Eugenia lowered her needles. "From which I take it you discovered something disturbing, what?" Across the faded splendour of the Aubusson rug, Pris met Eugenia's wise eyes. "Paddy spoke of something going on at Cromarty's that he couldn't stomach. That's why he left. And now he's disappeared. His friends think he's been done away with." Eugenia's brown eyes widened. "Great heavens!" "Oh, dear!" Hand rising to her throat, Adelaide stared. Turning to the desk, Pris opened the drawer. "I'm going to write to Russ and tell him he has to leave Cromarty's employ at once. If there's something bad happening with the horses, well, you know Russ. He'll get involved trying to put it right. But I don't want him in any danger, not if it's the sort where people disappear, never to be heard of again. If he can't bear to come home and deal with Papa, then he'll have to look for work training horses for someone else." Russ had always been horse-mad. His one burning ambition was to train an Irish Derby champion. While she didn't share his enthusiasm, Pris fully understood the fervour of his dreams. Unfortunately, their father, Denham Dalloway, Earl of Kentland, had rigid views on what constituted an appropriate occupation for his son and heir, namely the care and management of the family estates. Breeding and training horses was all very well for others, the implication being others of lesser degree, but was an unacceptable occupation for the next Earl of Kentland. No Dalloway would ever stoop to indulge in horse breeding on a commercial scale. So declared the Earl. Words had been exchanged, things said, wounds dealt on both sides. Pushed beyond bearing, Russ had stormed out of Dalloway Hall in a wild fury. He'd taken nothing more than what he could cram in his saddlebags and ridden away. 7 days later, just over 3 weeks ago, Pris had received a letter to say he'd found work at Lord Cromarty's stables, one of the major racing establishments in neighbouring County Wexford. She'd gone looking for Paddy, seeking reassurance, something to soothe her growing uneasiness over Russ's safety. Instead, she'd learned Russ was in a situation where his life might come under threat. Pulling a sheet of paper from the drawer, she laid it on the blotter. "If I write a note immediately, Patrick can ride over and deliver it this evening." Actually, my dear, before you write, I dare say you should read this." Pris turned to see Eugenia extracting a letter from beneath the endless fall of her knitting. Eugenia held out the missive. "From Russ. It was delivered with the post after lunch. When he couldn't find you, Bradley gave it to me rather than leave it on the salver in the hall." Where their father might see it. Bradley was their butler. Like most of the household, his sympathies lay with Russ. Rising, Pris took the letter. Returning to the desk, she broke her brother's seal, then, sinking onto the chair, unfolded the sheets, smoothed them, and read. "Russ has gone to England, to Newmarket, with the Cromarty racing string." She licked her suddenly dry lips and looked again at the pages in her hand. "He says—" She paused to steady her voice. "He says he thinks Harkness, the head stableman, is planning to run some racket that somehow revolves around horse breeding while in Newmarket. He overheard Harkness explaining to the head lad, Russ says he's a villainous sort, about how the illicit undertaking worked, and that it involves some register. He, Russ, didn't hear enough to understand the scheme, but he thinks the register Harkness was referring to is the register of all horses entitled by their breeding to race on English tracks." She flipped over a page, scanned, then reported. "Russ says he knows nothing of the details in the register, but if he's ever going to become a breeder of racehorses, he should obviously learn more about it regardless. And he'll be able to follow it up, as that register is kept at the Jockey Club in Newmarket." She turned the last page, then made a disgusted sound. "The rest is full of platitudes assuring me he'll be safe, that it'll all be perfectly fine, that even if there is anything wrong, all he has to do is tell Lord Cromarty, and it'll all be right as rain. Don't worry." And then he signs himself, "Your loving brother off on an adventure." Tossing the letter on the desk, she faced Eugenia and Adelaide. "I'll have to go to Newmarket." Adelaide's chin firmed. "We'll go to Newmarket. You can't go alone." Pris sent her a fleeting smile, then looked at Eugenia. Her aunt studied her, then nodded and calmly folded her knitting. "Indeed, dear, I see no alternative. Much as I love Russ, we cannot leave him to deal with whatever this is alone, and if there is some illicit scheme being hatched, you cannot, to my mind, risk even a letter to warn him, in case it falls into the wrong hands. You will need to speak with him. So—" Eugenia looked inquiringly at Pris. "What tale are we going to tell your father to explain our sudden need for a sojourn in England?" "I had hoped we'd have longer in reasonable privacy." Letting the door of the Twig and Bough coffee shop on Newmarket High Street swing shut behind him, Dillon Caxton stepped down to the pavement beside Barnaby Adair. "Unfortunately, the sunshine has brought the ladies and their daughters out in force." Scanning the conveyances thronging the high street, Dillon was forced to smile and acknowledge two matrons, each with beaming daughters. Tapping Barnaby's arm, he started strolling. "If we stand still, we'll invite attack." He could imagine the picture they made, he with his dark, dramatic looks most commonly described as Byronic. With Barnaby, a golden Adonis with curly hair and bright blue eyes by his side, the perfect foil. They were both tall, well set up, and elegantly and fashionably turned out. In the restricted society of Newmarket, it was no wonder the ladies were lining up to accost them. Unfortunately, their destination, the Jockey Club, lay some 100 yards distant. They had to run the gauntlet. He and Barnaby strolled on, casting his eye along the line of waiting carriages and their fair burdens. Not one stirred the remotest interest in him. Not one sweet face even moved him to curiosity. Unfortunately, becoming known as a gentleman with a hardened heart, one unsusceptible to feminine enticements, had piled additional fuel on the bonfire of the ladies' aspirations. Too many now viewed him as a challenge, a recalcitrant male they were determined to bring to heel. As for their mothers, with every year that passed, he was forced to exercise greater care, to keep his eyes ever open for social snares, those traps certain matrons set for the unwary. "Mrs. Cartwell, a pleasure to see you, ma'am." Taking the hand the haughty matron extended, he shook it, bowed to the vision of lovely...